To continue our conversation, this is part 2 of chapter 3. We're talking about the historical aspects of the sport market. So the bicycle craze and the crash that followed it serve as examples for members of the sport business industry in 3 key areas. First, the bicycle craze raised questions about how firms coped with the uncertainty created by intense competition. Overproduction and price cutting became watchwords in the sport industry. Second, the influence of the bicycle advertising message promoting sport in general convinced sport firms of the necessity of promoting all kinds of sport. Third, the bicycle craze influenced marketing strategy. Successful companies employed a variety of marketing techniques in an integrated marketing strategy. Marketing techniques integrated advertising, sponsorship, and endorsements, and included organizing participation through the development of local clubs and local activities. The use of a bicycle craze and the crash that followed it, traveling, salesmen, and trade show promotions. The bicycle craze taught manufacturers the importance of using national and local marketing and promotional campaigns. The growth of sport participation, as evidenced by increased sporting goods sales during the decade, was influenced by the drive to organize sport participation during the age of organization, the decades of the 1880s and 1890s. For example, YMCAs began to organize and market sport during this period, helping to create a youth sport market by the turn of the century. The United States Lawn Tennis Association, or USLTA, organized in 1881 and promoted tennis for both men and women by sponsoring national tournaments during the 1890s. The USGA offered similar opportunities for male and female golfers. As Betts in 1974 explained, the National Canoe Association in 1880, the National Croquet Association, the United States Skating Association in 1884, and the American Bowling Congress in 1895, all before 1900. Men's intercollegiate athletic organizations multiplied during the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, codifying rules of play and organizing and administering intercollegiate contests and charging spectators admission to watch athletes perform and selling equipment for players to improve performance. The segmentation of sport marketing commenced as sport business leaders recognized that the market for sport participants or sport audiences and sport equipment purchasers were segmented. The largest of these segments was the growing number of white, male, middle-class sport enthusiasts in U.S. cities. Middle-class consumers far outnumbered spenders and other segments in the market, and they had the money to buy participation opportunities, tickets to games and matches, and high-priced equipment to perform. Astute observers of the sports scene were also aware of the second important segment, the developing youth market. Periodically, readers of the USGD were informed about the necessity of catering to the American boy for 2 important reasons. First was the fact that the participation rate for boys was up and that an increasing number of boys purchased sport equipment. Second, entrepreneurs realized that today's youth participant would become tomorrow's adult participant. Brand recognition and brand loyalty began in adolescence. White, upper, and middle-class women constituted a third major segment in the sport market. Marketers were interested in enticing women to participate and purchase golf and tennis equipment, fishing equipment, bicycles, and athletic wear. By the turn of the 20th century, perceptive observers within the sport business industry saw opportunities to make money by selling participation opportunities, charging spectators admission to watch athletes perform, and selling equipment for players to improve upon performance. The segmentation of sport marketing commenced as sport business leaders recognized that the market for sport participants, sport audiences, and sport equipment purchasers was segmented. The largest of these segments was the growing number of white male middle-class sports enthusiasts. Athlete endorsements today are commonplace, as evidenced by deals between Sloane Stephens and Head, Tom Brady and Tag Heuer, Phil Mickelson and Rolex, Serena Williams and Nike, Usain Bolt and Gatorade, Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, Rafael Nadal and Richard Mille, Danica Patrick and Tissot, LeBron James and McDonald's, Aaron Rodgers and State Farm, Yang Xing and Adams Golf, and Cristiano Ronaldo and a host of companies. Such endorsements commenced decades ago. For example, in 1917, J.H. Hillrich signed German Hermann Ruth, otherwise known as Babe Ruth, to a contract that allowed the sporting goods company Hillrich and Bradsby, H&B, to use Ruth's autograph on its Louisville Slugger bats. 2 years later, the Babe Ruth autographed Louisville Slugger was the leading seller for H&B, outdistanced the sale of any other bat and sold in America. The contract with Ruth cost H&B $100 US and a set of golf clubs, probably the most lucrative deal for a company. Using an athlete's name to sell a product, particularly a sporting goods product, was not a novel Hall of Fame shortstop for the Pittsburgh Pirates to a similar deal back in 1905. Before 1910, Hillrich signed Ty Cobb and Napoleon LaHoye, both future Hall of Famers, to endorse contracts. Wagner, Cobb, and LaHoye were chosen to endorse Louisville Slugger bats because they were expert hitters. They were excellent choices for a baseball bat company whose slogan was, "The bat that gets more hits." This message, endorsed by the best hitters in professional baseball, sold bats. Advertisers used endorsements by experts to symbolize product quality and to establish brand name recognition. Product endorsements by experts attracted consumers who wanted to improve performance in some way. Endorsements linked participant performance to produce quality. Wagner, LaHoye, and others took the matter a step further. Ruth was more than simply an expert who informed consumers about bats. He was an icon, a personality, a hero, and a human interest story. His was a style to be copied, and it symbolized a certain type of individuality. Indeed, a vocabulary was created to describe him. People spoke of Ruthian feats to communicate heroic accomplishments. Consumers' desire to copy the Ruthian style and mode meant that Babe Ruth endorsements could be used to sell not only baseball bats, but also candy bars and other products unrelated to athletics. The First World War, 1914 to 1918, increased the attractiveness of the sporting goods segment of the sporting industry for companies seeking long-term profitability in at least three important ways. First, military training programs that introduced trained sports and soldiers in sport brought a new source of revenue to the industry. Second, the war had an immediate effect on the sale of sporting goods equipment because the demand for all kinds of athletic equipment increased. Third, the belief that sport would nurture and develop manly traits was further solidified by the war. Throughout the war, the military promoted sport as a means of training soldiers and developing better citizens. Local and state governments recognized the benefits of sport and the resultant demands for facilities. Similarly, physical education became a mandatory part of the educational curriculum. School and collegiate athletic programs flourished. The war functioned as a catalyst for the growth of sport during the 1920s. Because of these new entrants into the marketplace, leaders in the sporting goods segment of the sport industry soon realized that the industry had become highly competitive and consequently unprofitable by the mid-1920s. The cost of doing business increased and profits plummeted. To survive, manufacturers resorted to ruinous competitive practices such as price cutting. As the industry moved into the 1930s, sporting good leaders realized that cooperative efforts were needed to curb competition. Cutthroat competition decreased as industry leaders shared customer credit information, discussed solutions to common problems, and generally cooperated among themselves. These practices increased the individual and collective knowledge about the sporting goods segment of the sport industry. Competitors gained better understanding about the effects of competitive strategy on industry members and overall profitability. World War II severely curbed the production of sporting good equipment, especially goods made from rubber, leather, wood, cotton, and petroleum. Many sporting goods companies attempted to stockpile raw materials. This was a fruitless action because government policy curbed production of sport equipment regardless of material supplies. Rationing was the rule of civilian life during this time. Many sport and leisure activities were postponed indefinitely, terminated, or affected in any other ways. The prestigious Wimbledon championships were suspended from 1940 through 1945. Interesting that we're now going through some of these suspensions, and we'll see what happens with all of that, I suppose. College and high school sports programs were cut back or eliminated altogether. We've seen that as well. In both military and civilian life, sport participation became a matter of policy. Inductees into the Army and the Navy had to be trained. Sport, including highly competitive athletic events, became part of this training as a matter of military policy. The military tried to coerce every soldier and every sailor into the sporting life. Military leaders advised civilian authorities to adopt similar policies as part of their war effort. Post-war Americans sought out entertainment and leisure as sport participants and as spectators. Because of the growing popularity of men's football, a new professional football league began in 1946 and survived 3 seasons before merging with the NFL for the 1950 season. In 1949, the Men's Basketball Association of America merged with the National Basketball League to become the NBA. The end of the decade was a boom period for professional sport. World War II brought substantial numbers of women into the Army, Navy, and Coast Guard. Athletic competition became part of the training program for women, which copied the men's program. Women were encouraged to participate in competitive athletic programs in volleyball, archery, and basketball, because up until then they had not been allowed to. Women had been competing in industrial leagues since World War I. The 1930s witnessed tremendous expansion in women's industrial leagues, and particularly softball leagues. World War II brought women into more sports, and society's attitude toward the participation of women in sports began to change. An example is the Women's Professional Baseball League. The All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was established by Philip K. Wrigley, owner of the Wrigley Chewing Gum Company and the Chicago Cubs, to provide entertainment for sports fans during the war. Made famous by the movie A League of Their Own, the AAGPBL enjoyed success from 1943 to 1954. At its peak in 1948, 10 teams played in the AAGPBL, and more than 1 million fans watched them play. The AAGPBL, along with other societal changes in the United States, helped bring about the beginning of a positive change in thinking toward women in sport. Over the succeeding decades, sport participation rates for women grew dramatically. Between 1968 and 1980, high school girls' sport participation increased by more than 500%. Participation by women collegians increased nearly as much. The feminist movement of the late 1960s and 70s promoted tremendous growth in the women's market for sport and sport products. The fitness boom of the 1970s and 80s also influenced women's interest. Increased participation by women was also a matter of public policy. Title IX and the increased opportunities translated into increased sales. Sporting goods manufacturers, distributors, and retailers strove to do their bit for public policy by selling sport shoes, sport equipment, and sport apparel by promoting participation opportunities for female athletes. As the sport industry matured, the need for professionals trained in the business of sport became apparent. Earl Ziegler and Guy Lewis, Stephen Hardy, and Lawrence W. Fielding were educated and trained in sport history, were influential in the development and growth of sport management as a field of study. And here you can see these are some of the documentaries in ESPN 9 for Title IX, Venus versus, and you can see the director, and the topic was really Venus Williams and equal prize money. The NCAA Division I winningest coach, Pat Summitt. So there's quite a few stories associated with that women's participation. In 1960, Roone Arledge proposed to ABC executives a new plan for covering football games. The application of his plan revolutionized how sports were televised during the remainder of the 20th century. Arledge wanted to bring the TV viewer to the game and to get the audiences emotionally involved. He wanted viewers at home to experience the game as though they were at the stadium. Arledge reasoned that even if they were not football fans, they could still enjoy the game. Bringing the consumer to the game required developing a new method for covering the game. And Arledge increased the number of cameras from 3 to 12 or more and introduced instant replay. To bring the action up close and personal, he used handheld and isolated cameras. To help duplicate the live atmosphere, Arledge used directional and remote microphones to capture the sounds of the game and the crowd. Arledge believed that televised sport was in the commercial entertainment business. Television programs survived only if they could draw high ratings, support advertising dollars, and generate corporate profits. The same was true for televised sport. This requirement meant that televised game had to attract a variety of viewers. Arledge realized that casual viewers and fans were far more important than avid football consumers because there were more of them. These people required more than just a sport to be entertained. Arledge believed that the participants in a sport contest were the essence of entertainment. Sport viewing was experiential. Therefore, Arledge sought to extend the entertainment value of sport beyond the game itself, and his lessons on improving sport entertainment were copied by others. For instance, the 1970s ushered in the age of the mascot. Later in that decade, the success of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders prompted other teams to add cheerleaders to extend the entertainment value of the game. Additional ways that sport was tailored to appeal to more followers included exploding scoreboards, artificial grass, extended schedules and playoff systems, and rule changes to make games more action-packed and exciting. Students may not remember a time when social media did not have a significant influence on the sport industry. However, a search of the leading trade magazines for sport industry practitioners will reveal the entrance of various social media platforms into the field's dialogue. Although an online keyword search of social media mentions in Street and Smith's Sports Business Journal, or SBJ, is not going to reveal every article published, the results of searches on the publication's website do not provide a glimpse into the recent rise of social media, into its influence on the sport industry. For instance, SBJ first mentioned MySpace, one of the first social media sites, in 2005. And the following year, the journal included its first mentions of Facebook and YouTube. Facebook and YouTube are still often used in the sport industry, and Pinterest, Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter are frequently used by leagues and teams, personnel, fans, and other sport industry stakeholders. For instance, the MLB president of Business and Media, Bob Bowman, reported Twitter is the primary medium for instant news for the league, and Facebook is ideal when the league hopes to reach the largest audience. In 2016, Facebook was the most dominant social media site among sport fans, with about 67% of the total of overall digital audience, followed by YouTube, which was 44%, Twitter 34%, Instagram 26%, and Snapchat 10%. The growth in social media consumption is expected to increase in the future, primarily because of the prevalence of mobile devices, of smartphones and tablets. According to Katz in 2016, mobile is the fastest growing platform for a sports content perspective, especially for younger fans. Sports teams and leagues spend heavily to capitalize on the social media market. According to SBJ, sport analytics firms charge customers between $50,000 and $100,000 per year for sophisticated social media data. Spending on analytics is logical due to the vast revenue potential social media represents. The Chicago Blackhawks, for example, valued their social media presence at $5.7 million in 2016. The critical thinking section relates to the earlier historical aspects of the sport market section. Reflecting on the business of sport during the first decade of the 20th century, P.R. Robinson, in 1909, president of the New York Sporting Goods Company, concluded that it had been a good decade. Robinson noted tremendous growth in the popularity of sport, popularity in baseball, tennis, golf, football, basketball, fishing, target shooting, and roller skating. Looking to the future, Robinson saw only good times for the sport and business industry. As times became better, he concluded the demand for high-priced sporting equipment would increase because people would want to perform more effectively. So was Robinson correct in his prediction? And if so, what are some variables a sport industry analyst could use to evaluate success? You can outline your response using modern examples through which industry experts currently evaluate the success of a sport business. Beginning in 1927, Frank Bradsby, president of the Chamber of Commerce of Sporting Goods Manufacturers, later called the SGMA and then the SFIA, led a concerted effort to develop a code of ethics for sporting good manufacturers. Bradsby was prompted to lead the fight for a code of ethics by several industry-wide trade practices that hurt the image of the industry and curbed profits. Key among these unethical practices were price cutting, selling below cost, tying contracts, and giving hidden rebates or discounts to secure sales, commercial bribery or piracy of trademarks, brand names and athletic endorsements, piracy of the term official, misbranding of products relative to grade, quality, and guarantees, and interference with existing contracts. Through the auspices of the SGMA, Bradsby enlisted several sporting good leaders, including Julian Curtis of Spalding Brothers, H.B. Canby of Crawford, McGregor, and Canby, E. Goldsmith of Goldsmith Sons, and L.B. Isley of Wilson Sporting Goods to help create a code of conduct for the sporting goods segment of the sport industry. Between 1927 and 1930, leaders in the SGMA established a set of ethical trade practices for sporting good manufacturers. These practices were endorsed by the entire membership of the SGMA at the industry-wide meeting in 1930. Today, SFIA represents more than 1,000 sporting goods and fitness-related entities, brands, manufacturers, retailers, and marketers, more than 3,000 areas, locations, plants, distribution centers, and more than 375,000 individuals employed in the field and industry that generates 150 billion US dollars in wholesales. And here is the continuum, the end of that continuum that we were discussing earlier, and you can see 1999 NHL Canadian teams petitioned federal government for financial aid. The NBA luxury tax system was implemented. And 2005, Manchester United bought by American Malcolm Glazier. So these are a few things that finished out the end of the term and really put us at current day where we are today. So in summary, this chapter provides sketches of some of the significant developments that took place in the 19th century and describe the foundation for the development of the sport business industry in the United States. The key events, innovations, and entrepreneurs presented here are only a few of the myriad activities and people who have played some crucial roles in the development and history of sport management. The sketches provided in this chapter are useful because history offers many lessons relevant to your studies and your career in the sport business industry. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to talking with you again soon. Have a great day.